The NFL is where the world's most elite athletes become legends, but for some stars, the fall from grace is more catastrophic than anyone could ever imagine. Consider the case of Kellen Winslow II, convicted for a series of heinous crimes against women. Winslow's reign of terror ended with a guilty verdict for rape and indecent exposure, a story paralleled in tragedy by Henry Ruggs III, whose drunk driving led to a fatal inferno. Henry Ruggs III is at the center of a deadly car wreck, and he's expected to be charged with driving under the influence, a felony. These are the stories of the NFL players now living their lives from behind prison walls. First, Chad Wheeler. Chad Wheeler, a former offensive tackle in the NFL, built his early reputation at USC before playing professionally for the New York Giants and the Seattle Seahawks. Born on January 19, 1994, Wheeler was a powerhouse prospect out of high school, ultimately earning a prestigious first-team All-Pac-12 selection at USC. But his time in college was a brutal gauntlet of injuries, including multiple concussions and a torn ACL in 2014, all of which sent his draft stock plummeting. Beyond the physical toll, a disturbing incident in 2015 foreshadowed deeper issues when police were called to a disturbance. The confrontation with Wheeler was so intense that officers had to use beanbag rounds to subdue him before he was placed under a psychiatric evaluation. Despite these glaring red flags, Wheeler still broke into the NFL in 2017 as an undrafted free agent. The New York Giants took a chance on him, and he fought his way into the lineup, even starting games at right tackle in 2018. After injuries led the Giants to waive him in 2019, Wheeler found a new home on the Seattle Seahawks practice squad, eventually making it to the active roster. He saw action on and off throughout the 2020 season, but in January of 2021, Wheeler's football career came to a violent and permanent end. On January 23, 2021, inside an apartment in Kent, Washington, Wheeler unleashed a horrifying assault on his girlfriend in a brutal domestic attack. Police reports detailed that the savage attack unfolded within the confines of Wheeler's own apartment. The victim, terrified for her life, managed to lock herself in a bathroom and call 911, telling dispatchers she was certain she was about to be killed. When authorities arrived, they discovered Wheeler standing near the scene. They noted he was unnervingly calm and compliant. Wheeler was arrested and faced a barrage of felony charges: first-degree domestic violence, assault, domestic violence, unlawful imprisonment, and resisting arrest. He was released shortly after on a $400,000 bail, only to be immediately cut by the Seattle Seahawks. Wheeler issued a public statement claiming he was stepping away from football to get help, but the wheels of justice were already turning. On February 1, 2021, he pleaded not guilty, initiating a long and arduous court battle that finally reached its conclusion in 2023. On November 9, 2023, a King County jury delivered its verdict. Wheeler was guilty of domestic violence assault. The court affirmed that the brutal attack had caused substantial bodily harm, and prosecutors successfully argued that the chilling details warranted a felony conviction. Chad Wheeler was sentenced to 6.5 years in prison. He is currently serving that time in a Washington state penitentiary. Next, we turn to an NFL player whose choice to drive drunk resulted in the most horrific outcome imaginable: Henry Ruggs III. He was a former wide receiver for the Las Vegas Raiders, whose explosive two-season career was extinguished by a prison sentence. Born on January 24, 1999, Ruggs was raised in Montgomery, Alabama. He was a phenom in high school, a blur of an athlete who clocked a 10.58 in the 100-meter dash and attracted over 20 college scholarship offers after just 2 years of playing football. He committed to Alabama, where he evolved into one of the most electrifying and dangerously fast receivers in the nation, ending his college tenure with 24 touchdown receptions, the third highest in the university's storied history. Ruggs entered the 2020 NFL Draft as one of the most coveted wideouts in his class and blazed a 4.27-second 40-yard dash at the Combine. The Raiders seized the opportunity, selecting him 12th overall, making him the very first receiver taken that year. His rookie season was filled with sparks of brilliance, and by his 7th game in 2021, he had already amassed 469 receiving yards. But on November 2, 2021, his entire world came to a screeching halt. At approximately 3:39 in the morning, in Spring Valley, Nevada, Ruggs was behind the wheel of a Chevrolet Corvette, his girlfriend beside him. It was later confirmed he was traveling at an unthinkable 156 miles per hour just seconds before impact. A blood test administered 2 hours after the wreck revealed a staggering 0.161% alcohol content, more than double Nevada's legal limit. Ruggs's Corvette violently slammed into the back of a Toyota RAV4 driven by 23-year-old Tina Tintor. The force of the collision was so immense that the SUV was instantly engulfed in a ball of fire. Tina Tintor and her dog perished inside the burning wreckage. Ruggs and his girlfriend survived the crash with injuries that were not life-threatening. Immediately after his release from the hospital, Ruggs was taken to the Clark County Detention Center and charged with DUI resulting in death and reckless driving. The Raiders cut him from the team that very same day. In the initial court proceedings, Ruggs' defense team fought to have the blood test results thrown out. Prosecutors, fearing the case could crumble if the blood evidence was deemed inadmissible, pushed hard for a plea agreement that would prevent Ruggs from evading the primary DUI felony charge. Ultimately, Ruggs pleaded guilty to a felony count of DUI resulting in death and a misdemeanor for vehicular manslaughter. On August 9, 2023, Henry Ruggs III was sentenced to serve 3 to 10 years in a Nevada state prison. He will become eligible for parole in 2026. Our next story descends into darkness, detailing the fall of an NFL player convicted for a horrifying series of crimes against women. His name is Kellen Winslow II. Once a celebrated NFL tight end, he now resides behind prison walls. Born into football royalty in San Diego, California, he is the son of the legendary Hall of Fame tight end Kellen Winslow. At the University of Miami, his talent was undeniable. He was crowned a unanimous All-American and won the John Mackey Award, recognized as the best tight end in the entire nation. He declared for the 2004 NFL Draft, where his future seemed limitless, and the Cleveland Browns snatched him up as the 6th overall pick. His career spanned several teams: the Browns, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the New England Patriots, and the New York Jets, highlighted by a Pro Bowl appearance in 2007. But his professional journey was shattered by injuries, including a devastating broken leg and a torn ACL from a motorcycle crash. His time on the field ended in 2013, though he made a couple of fleeting attempts to return in 2017 and 2018. Away from the gridiron, however, a much darker story was unfolding. Winslow's descent into criminality began in 2014 with a charge for drug possession. But the true nightmare ignited in June of 2018 when he was arrested in San Diego County, accused of breaking into a mobile home park with the intent to commit burglary. Just days later, the hero facade shattered completely. He was arrested again, this time on sickening charges that included kidnapping and assault. Prosecutors painted a chilling portrait of a predator who targeted society's most vulnerable homeless women and the elderly. Then a ghost from his past resurfaced, an accusation of assaulting an unconscious 17-year-old girl back in 2003 when he was just 19. Winslow posted bail, but his freedom was short-lived. He was dragged back into custody when an even more disturbing wave of charges was filed in 2019: lewd conduct, indecent exposure, and the battery of an elderly woman. His first trial in June 2019 ended with guilty verdicts for mistreatment, indecent exposure, and committing a lewd act. The jury was deadlocked on the remaining counts, resulting in a mistrial. By November of 2019, Winslow saw the writing on the wall and accepted a plea deal. He finally admitted his guilt, pleading to the assault of that unconscious 17-year-old and to the battery of a 54-year-old female hitchhiker. While the plea deal allowed him to escape a potential life sentence in 2021, the gavel came down hard. Winslow was officially sentenced to 14 years in prison. His lawyers desperately argued that he was suffering from brain trauma and possible CTE, but the defense did nothing to change his fate. As of 2023, Kellen Winslow II is an inmate at the California Correctional Institution in Tehachapi, California, where he is now serving out his sentence. Our next story, however, moves from predation to a cold-blooded conspiracy: an NFL player now in prison for plotting the murder of a millionaire. Eric Naposki, a former linebacker for both the NFL and the World League. Born in Tuckahoe, New York, he played high school football at several schools before his talent secured him a scholarship to the University of Connecticut. His college career was turbulent. A dispute with coaches led him to quit the team, though he did eventually return to complete his degree. He broke into the NFL the hard way as an undrafted free agent in 1988, playing briefly for the New England Patriots, the Indianapolis Colts, the New York Jets, and the Dallas Cowboys. The majority of his professional achievements came in the World League of American Football, where he played 4 seasons with the Barcelona Dragons, helping them capture the 1997 World Bowl title. On December 15, 1994, a wealthy inventor named Bill McLaughlin was gunned down inside the supposed safety of his gated Newport Beach mansion. For 15 long years, the murder remained a cold case. Then in 2009, investigators arrested Naposki in Connecticut and charged him with the killing. Prosecutors unraveled a sordid tale of betrayal, alleging Naposki carried out the murder alongside McLaughlin's girlfriend, Nanette Johnston, who was also Naposki's secret lover. The motive was pure greed. Johnston was positioned to collect more than $2.5 million from McLaughlin's life insurance and savings if he were dead. The prosecution argued that Johnston was living a double life, managing her wealthy boyfriend's finances and living in his luxury home, all while carrying on a hidden affair with Naposki. Damning evidence revealed that Naposki worked as a bouncer mere hundreds of yards from the murder scene, giving him perfect access and a chilling opportunity. Yet the case was built on a web of circumstantial evidence. No murder weapon was ever found. There were no fingerprints, no DNA, and not a single eyewitness. In July of 2011, an Orange County jury delivered its verdict, convicting Naposki of first-degree murder with special circumstances for financial gain and the personal use of a firearm. He faced the death penalty, but prosecutors chose not to pursue it. In August of 2012, his fate was sealed life in prison without the possibility of parole. Johnston was also convicted and received the exact same sentence. To this day, Naposki has relentlessly maintained his innocence. His appeals have argued that the 15-year delay before charges were filed cost him crucial evidence that could have proven his alibi. In 2014, the appellate court slammed that door shut, rejecting his appeal and ruling that there were no errors that could possibly overturn the conviction. As of today, Eric Naposki is incarcerated at California State Prison Corcoran, serving a life sentence with no hope of release. And finally, we turn to an NFL player who masterminded a massive fraud scheme, Robert McCoon. Robert McCoon is a former NFL linebacker currently serving a 5-year federal prison sentence for orchestrating an audacious healthcare fraud scheme that preyed upon dozens of other former NFL players. McCoon was born in Mobile, Alabama, where he was a dominant force in both football and track at LaFleur High School. His journey started not on a football field, but in the military, where he devoted 3 years to the U.S. National Guard with deployments to Korea and Kuwait. Only after his service did he take to the gridiron at Louisville, where he became the heart of the defense, a 2-year starting middle linebacker who dominated his way to all-conference honors. The dream of turning pro became a reality in 2005 when the Washington Redskins called his name in the 5th round of the draft. His rookie year was the battle spent mostly on the practice squad, but he fought his way into 5 regular season contests and 2 playoff showdowns, making his mark on special teams. But his grip on an NFL roster was fragile. In the years that followed, he found himself adrift, bouncing between the Miami Dolphins, Baltimore Ravens, and Cleveland Browns, rarely getting any significant playing time. When his NFL prospects finally dried up, he refused to hang up his cleats, heading north to the Canadian Football League to play for the Calgary Stampeders and the Toronto Argonauts. In Toronto, he discovered a new sense of purpose, rising as a formidable leader on defense. He was a key force in the team's historic victory in the 100th Grey Cup in 2012. But this triumph would be overshadowed by a dark chapter that began years after his football career was over. Between June of 2017 and April of 2018, he orchestrated a widespread healthcare scam, specifically targeting the Gene Upshaw NFL Player Health Reimbursement Plan. This was a fund created as a lifeline meant to cover medical bills for former NFL players and their families. McCoon was the architect behind 68 fraudulent claims for incredibly expensive medical equipment, including hyperbaric oxygen chambers, ultrasound machines, and electromagnetic therapy devices. The chilling truth was that none of this equipment was ever actually bought. He entangled 51 other former players in his web of lies, filing claims in their names for machines they never received and never used. In the end, Moon and his collaborators tried to siphon approximately $2.9 million from the fund meant to help their brethren. Federal investigators eventually unraveled the entire scheme, and on December 12, 2019, the consequences arrived. Munn was charged with wire fraud, healthcare fraud, and conspiracy. He initially proclaimed his innocence, pleading not guilty, but facing a mountain of evidence, he eventually had to abandon the facade. In September 2021, he admitted his guilt on all charges, which included aggravated identity theft. By February 2022, he was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. Although 13 other former players were also charged, authorities identified McCoon as the undisputed mastermind who concocted the scheme and submitted most of the false claims. Robert Moon is now an inmate in federal custody, serving out the sentence for his elaborate deception. Our next story descends into a different kind of darkness, involving an NFL player who murdered his girlfriend in a truly shocking and brutal fashion. His name is Kevin Ware Jr., a former NFL tight end who once played for both the Washington Redskins and the San Francisco 49ers. While he was never a superstar, he reached the pinnacle of the sport, appearing in 16 NFL games, and for a short time living a life many only dream of. But beyond the field, his world was collapsing into a nightmare of violence, narcotics, and ultimately cold-blooded murder. The warning signs had been there for years. Ware's criminal record began long before the murder, dating back to 2002 when he pleaded guilty to misdemeanor assault while playing college football. After his brief NFL career fizzled out, his encounters with law enforcement became a regular occurrence. In 2010, he found himself charged with theft and evading police after another assault. Then, in 2018, he received a 2-year prison sentence for possession of a controlled substance with intent to sell. And then came 2021, the year his life completely detonated. On April 19, 2021, Ware was stopped by police in Magnolia, Texas. What they found inside his car was a deadly arsenal, illegal drugs, a loaded AK-47, and a loaded 9mm pistol. As a convicted felon, he was legally barred from owning any firearms. He was arrested and charged on the spot, yet he managed to post bond the very next day. Less than 1 month later, his 29-year-old girlfriend, Taylor Pomaski, disappeared. Neighbors told police about a vicious argument they witnessed at a party the couple hosted on April 25th. After that night, no one ever saw Pomaski alive again. Suspicion immediately fell on Ware, especially after he violated his bail and was arrested once more in June. After months of searching, on December 10, 2021, investigators made a horrifying discovery in northern Harris County: human remains. They had been horribly burned, but DNA analysis confirmed the unthinkable. It was Taylor Pomaski. In July 2022, Ware was formally indicted for her murder and for the sickening act of tampering with her corpse as prosecutors revealed the full savage details of the crime. She had been bludgeoned with a blunt object and her body had been set on fire. Ware remained in jail the entire time, already imprisoned on the drug and weapons offenses. In May of 2025, he finally faced his demons and pleaded guilty to murdering Pomaski. To avoid a life sentence, he accepted a deal for 30 years in state prison. And now we turn to another former player who ran a sophisticated scheme and committed a string of devastating crimes. John Robert Leake. He is a former NFL linebacker who had brief tenures with the Tennessee Titans, the Atlanta Falcons, and the Green Bay Packers. Leake's story began in Plano, Texas. He played his college football at Clemson from 2000 to 2003 and broke into the NFL as an undrafted free agent in 2004. He spent his time fighting for roster spots on practice squads, seeing limited action between 2005 and 2006. After football was over, Leake transitioned into the business world, a path that would lead him straight into a life of fraud. From June 2015 to March 2020, Leake orchestrated a years-long Ponzi scheme, luring in victims with promises of astronomical returns on their investments. He wove intricate lies, telling people he was deeply involved in high-yield ventures, from luxury real estate and rental properties to massive gold mining operations in Alaska and Ghana. The truth was, none of these ventures ever existed. Leake spun a web of deceit, luring his victims with the irresistible promise of high-yield investments and staggering returns. He painted a picture of immense personal wealth, a successful portfolio backed by millions of his own dollars, a complete fabrication designed to earn their trust. To seal the deal, he offered official-looking promissory notes, a seemingly ironclad guarantee of repayment at attractive fixed interest rates. But the moment their cash was in his hands, the entire investment was revealed to be a lie. Instead of investing, he bankrolled a lavish lifestyle, paying down credit cards, covering rent, funding car payments, and fueling a gambling habit. In a classic Ponzi scheme maneuver, he funneled money from new investors to pay fictitious interest to the old ones, keeping the entire charade from collapsing. All told, Leake managed to swindle over $8.1 million from 6 unsuspecting victims, leaving a trail of devastation that caused more than $3 million in actual losses, all from phantom investments that were nothing but smoke and mirrors. Federal prosecutors ultimately charged him with wire fraud and money laundering. In January of 2025, a federal judge brought the hammer down, sentencing him to 30 months behind bars and ordering him to pay $5,314,050 in restitution. Our next story uncovers the terrifying dark side of an NFL superstar, a man who preyed on vulnerable young women. His name is Darren Sharper. For 14 seasons, Darren Mallory Sharper was a force to be reckoned with in the NFL, a celebrated safety for the Green Bay Packers, the Minnesota Vikings, and the New Orleans Saints. A 5-time Pro Bowler and a 2-time first-team All-Pro, Sharper etched his name in the record books, ranking 6th all-time in interceptions and tying for the most defensive touchdowns in the history of the league. Raised in Virginia, Sharper was the golden boy, a prodigy who dominated on the football field and excelled in the classroom at Hermitage High School. His legendary status continued at William & Mary, where he shattered school records with 24 career interceptions and over 1,000 punt return yards. Selected in the second round of the 1997 NFL Draft by the Packers, he rose to become one of the most elite defensive backs in the game, a journey that peaked with a glorious Super Bowl victory with the Saints in 2010. But off the field, a monster was lurking. Sharper's secret life was one of unimaginable horror. Starting in 2011, he began a terrifying campaign of assaults targeting women at parties and nightclubs and inside private homes across California, Arizona, Louisiana, and Nevada. His method was chillingly simple. He would mix potent prescription sedatives with alcohol, drugging his victims into a helpless state, making it nearly impossible for them to identify him or for authorities to build a case. The official investigation uncovered at least 9 victims, but the true number is feared to be as high as 16. He didn't act alone. Sharper's heinous crimes were carried out with the help of 2 accomplices, Brandon Liardi and Eric Nunez, who actively assisted in the assaults. Both men were ultimately convicted and handed lengthy prison sentences to run concurrently with Sharper's. Finally, in 2014, the law caught up with him. Sharper was arrested facing a staggering list of charges across multiple states, which included aggravated assault and conspiracy to distribute drugs. He eventually pleaded guilty or no contest in California, Arizona, Louisiana, and Nevada. The judgment was severe. Sharper was given concurrent sentences that added up to 20 years in state prison and another 18 years and 4 months in federal prison on top of 3 years of supervised release and a $20,000 fine. He is now required to register as an offender and must complete mandated offender treatment. The heinous nature of his crimes instantly obliterated his post-football career. He had a brief stint as a television analyst for WL-TV and the NFL Network, but that came to an abrupt end with his arrest. The man once hailed as one of the greatest defensive players in NFL history is now nothing more than a convicted serial predator serving his time at FCY Elkton with a release scheduled for late 2028. And finally, we turn to the gut-wrenching story of an NFL player now imprisoned for the murder of a 5-year-old child. Cierre Wood. Cierre Marcel Wood is a former NFL running back whose once bright future imploded in a storm of tragedy and a horrific criminal conviction. A college superstar at Notre Dame, Wood's professional career was a flickering flame with brief appearances for the Houston Texans, the New England Patriots, the Baltimore Ravens, the Seattle Seahawks, and the Buffalo Bills, plus a stretch in the Canadian Football League with the Hamilton Tiger Cats and Montreal Alouettes. Wood's story began in Oxnard, California, where he was a phenom at Santa Clara High School, putting up unbelievable numbers with over 2,600 rushing yards and 34 touchdowns in his junior year alone. Honored as a USA Today All-American, he was one of the nation's most sought-after recruits, ultimately choosing Notre Dame over several Pac-12 powerhouses. At Notre Dame, he quickly seized the starting running back position in 2011, racking up over 1,000 yards and 9 touchdowns. But cracks began to show. Off-field troubles surfaced, leading to a 2-game suspension in 2012 for breaking team rules. After he declared for the 2013 NFL Draft, his name was never called. He went undrafted, eventually signing as a free agent with the Houston Texans. His pro career was a revolving door of disappointment marked by a string of releases and demotions to various practice squads. He could never recapture the magic of his high school and college days, and a devastating torn ACL with the Bills effectively shattered any remaining hope of a comeback. But in 2019, Wood's life didn't just fall apart, it plunged into absolute darkness. On April 10, 2019, he and his girlfriend, Amy Taylor, were taken into custody in Las Vegas, arrested in connection with the death of Taylor's 5-year-old daughter, Lariah Davis. The details that emerged were stomach-turning. Investigators described a little girl who had suffered extreme bruising and horrific trauma, allegedly from relentless physical abuse and being forced to perform brutal exercise routines as punishment for being overweight. The community was left reeling, utterly horrified that a former professional athlete, a man once celebrated for his physical prowess, could be accused of such a monstrous crime. In 2024, Wood admitted guilt to second-degree murder and the abuse of a child, drawing a life sentence but with a chance of freedom after just 12 years and 4 months. But the NFL star we're about to discuss is facing a staggering 41-year sentence for masterminding a drug empire. His name is Daryl Henley. Daryl Keith Henley was on a trajectory to greatness. A gifted quarterback for the Los Angeles Rams, his phenomenal skill at UCLA had already crowned him a consensus All-American in 1988. Chosen in the second round of the 1989 NFL Draft, Henley wasn't just a player. He became a cornerstone of the Rams' defense, appearing in 76 games and snatching 12 interceptions. But the darkness of Henley's private life was about to swallow his public triumphs whole. By the early 1990s, Henley had plunged deep into the criminal underworld, becoming a key figure in a drug network that spanned the entire nation. From the secrecy of his Brea, California home, he weaponized his fame, luring people into his web, including a former Rams cheerleader, Tracy Dano, to mule suitcases packed with narcotics across state lines. His sprawling criminal enterprise eventually cost him his spot on the field, forcing him to sit out the last 11 games of the 1993 season, all while still cashing his $600,000 paycheck. He made a brief, court-monitored return in 1994, but when his contract expired, the multi-million-dollar deal that should have been his destiny vanished, replaced by an unstoppable spiral into utter ruin. In March of 1995, the hammer fell. Henley and four of his accomplices, one of them, his own uncle, were found guilty of drug trafficking charges, sealing his catastrophic fall from a celebrated athlete to a convicted kingpin. But even behind the walls of a Los Angeles jail awaiting his fate, Henley's evil only intensified. In a chilling discovery, investigators uncovered a plot he had orchestrated to assassinate the very judge who presided over his trial, Gary L. Taylor, and the key witness, Tracy Dano, hatching the scheme from his cell and bribing a guard to get his hands on a phone. The sheer audacity of Henley's plan sent shockwaves through the legal world, revealing a man who was more of a menace locked away than he ever was on the outside. In two separate federal hearings in March of 1997, Henley was condemned to 41 years and 3 months. In the nation's most secure prisons, a sentence designed to keep him caged until he was well into his mid-60s. Judge James Eidemann branded Henley a stone-cold criminal who required 24-hour supervision. Assistant U.S. attorneys acknowledged the sentence was severe, but insisted it was absolutely necessary for a man whose crimes were so brazen and far-reaching. We want to hear what you think down in the comments. And before you go, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to NFL Rivals so you never miss another story like this.